2021 annual conference. That is an easy way to enter the conference. It's going to bring you into your.
Started recognizing that this is going to be quite a 2-3 hour workshops. This is going to be fairly long. And we realized that we don't want people just staring at the screen for that long. We want to try as close as possible to replicate what it's like to sit in the same room. So for that, what I'm going to ask is that if you have a webcam, please turn it on. It's not distracting to me at all. And I think it will make it better and easier for us to be able to go and communicate back and forth. All right, that's the first thing. The second thing is, if you have a question, just unmute your mic. This is basically going to be 2-3 hour demos with some breaks, but 2-3 hour demos in there. So I want to make sure that we, as close as possible, replicate what it's like to sit in the same room. All right. So let's start off just by introducing Panda Consulting. I was thinking back, it's been close to 10 years now since we've been starting to come up to WLIA, and we really love it up there. We're sorry we're not going to be up there in person this year, but maybe next year, if we can all get vaccinated and stuff. But I just want to introduce Panda, who we are. We've been existing since 1998. Matter of fact, I actually have been involved with ESRI for much longer than that. I actually was one of the early beta testers on ArcView 1. It's a long time ago. I am a professional surveyor in Florida and in South Carolina. I've taught surveying at our local college, past president of the Florida Association of Cadastral Mappers, and current member of the Florida Board of Professional Regulators. So we go and regulate surveying. I am, for all intents and purposes, a platypus. I'm part surveyor, part GIS professional. Interestingly, within 3 weeks of getting my license back in the 80s, I got involved in GIS. So I quickly realized how exciting GIS is and the potential of it, and decided to go and focus my energies on there. But I am that platypus. All right. So schedule today. So we've all been through, and we've gone through all the traditional types of parcel fabric sessions that there are out there, being given by ESRI and by Panda and ProWest and all of these companies that are doing this. And I decided I wanted to do something different. We've all seen the slides. We all know what they are. So I decided I'm going to do something different. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go and build a parcel fabric from scratch. But rather than just telling you what something is, I'm going to tell you what it's for, how it gets used, why it's in there, and some of the implications along the way. So I'm going to take this and very slowly, methodically build up a parcel fabric this morning. So we're going to go and do that. We're going to migrate some data over. We're going to explore it, see what's set, what's not set, all that. Then this afternoon, we're going to talk about, okay, now let's take what you get out of the box and let's talk about configuring it and customizing it. And at that point, we're going to look at things such as setting up the data dictionaries, setting up sort of the configuration components of it, what gets displayed, not displayed. We'll also start getting into things such as some attribute-driven symbology, and we'll talk about using Arcade, both for labeling and also for attribute rules. And we'll start looking at applying some attribute rules to this data set that we're putting in place here. All right. With that, one more thing again, I want this to be an interactive learning experience. I want you to get something out of here, not just spend 6 hours with this guy from down in South Florida. I want you to learn something. I want you to pick something up, something that you can use in the future. I'm going to attempt to use as few slides as any. Matter of fact, The more I think about it, the more this might be the last slide that we actually look at today, because we don't want this to be a webinar. A webinar has gotten that connotation that it's like somebody talking at you and you looking at slides. We don't want to do that, which means I want you to be interactive. I want you to be involved in this, and that's it. All right. So the parcel fabric, what is it? What does it do and such? Obviously, it uses ArcGIS Pro. You need ArcGIS Pro to be able to go and work with the ArcGIS parcel fabric. And it differs from previous attempts to go and build some sort of a parcel editing solution, in that rather than being a complete configuration on here, the parcel fabric is something different. And the way you deploy it is different. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go and look at, I've got a geodatabase here, WLIA geodatabase. It's got some standard feature classes in there. It's got a parcel feature class, it's got a road feature class, a subdivision feature class, and a municipalities feature class. And these are just standard feature classes. Nothing strange about them at all. If I go and open on and look at them in the design component on here, I can actually see here's the standard types of fields that are in here. Nothing strange or unique about it. So I just want to go and pick up and start with this. So let's build our parcel fabric. Let's look at the parcel fabric and see how it's actually constructed. And the first thing we want to do with the parcel fabric is we want to create a feature data set. Now, why a feature data set? What does a feature data set need? A feature data set is required primarily because all of the feature classes inside of the parcel fabric share topology. And in order to have topology, you need to have a feature data set, which defines the spatial reference for all layers that are grouped underneath it. So I will just call this Pro Parcel Fabric. All right, and I will go and actually go back to this, and I will import the coordinate values from the parcels here. All right, so here is the projection for this. On here, I'll go ahead and create the feature data set. Once this is created, I can now go in here and look, and here it is right here. Again, there's nothing in here. There's nothing interesting about it. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to new, and I'm going to create a parcel fabric. And let's just call this parcel fabric. Let's get creative, right? Go ahead and run this. Now, this is going to create the actual object, which is the parcel fabric object. It is not necessarily a configuration of your layers as much as a programming object that allows the software to go and run certain processes for you. All right. Let's wait for this. By the way, I'm doing this all in a file geodatabase that's stored on a server here for me. It's not versioned. We will talk about implementation and deployment possibly later. All right, so let's go back here. Now we have a parcel fabric. That's all there is to it. But what the heck is it that we have? And what we have right now is the parcel fabric itself. All right, and this, by the way, is ArcGIS Pro 2.7. The parcel fabric is a controller object for layers, feature classes that are involved in that parcel fabric. It allows it to do certain things. The reality is, on the bottom, the bottom line of this is that it goes and checks against rules and makes sure that the rules are satisfied for these layers that are involved in that parcel fabric. In this case, I can see that I have a Parcel fabric, it is version number 4. Version number 4 is the 4th iteration of the fabric. There's some minor changes along the way. This is minimum ArcGIS Pro release that's needed to edit this is 2.7. It was created here and it has topology included inside of here. And it shows me the maximum parcels for a build or for validate. Don't have to be as concerned about this at the moment. And then what parcel types do I actually have? When I look at this, again, this is just a controller object. It's not a structure at all. It's just an object. So what is it that's in here? Well, there's a couple of feature classes that get created when you create a parcel fabric. One of them is this parcel line adjustment lines and adjustment points and adjustment vertices. These three are involved in 2.6 and above, and they are for specific geoprocessing tools that allow you to go and perform least squares adjustments. If you don't use least squares adjustments, these layers never get used. But if you do least squares adjustments, this is where they go and deploy temporary elements to tell you what's going to get adjusted, how is it going to get adjusted, what vectors, where is it going to move? And I'll try to show that later when we actually do a test on this. But these first three layers, they're really just for least squares adjustments and consistency checks. They were available at 2.6 and 2.7. This next layer is parcel fabric connection. It's a line feature class layer. That line feature class layer serves the same thing as the old ArcMap parcel fabric connection lines. These were origin connection lines. These serve as initial lines that are drawn, usually for things like meets and bounds legal descriptions, where you have a point of commencement and you've got a series of courses that go and eventually get you a point of beginning. Those courses between the point of commencement and point of beginning, those are called connection lines. They have some unique things about them, but they are a separate line feature class. They are not stored necessarily as part of any individual parcel on here. They can be used for multiple parcels on them. The next feature class that's get created right out of the box is a parcel fabric points. Points are unique in that part of the definition is that lines have to have points or corners on the ends of them. And this one feature class stores every point that's in your parcel fabric. So the individual parcel types share these points. So you can have one point that gets shared by multiple elements on here, and these are representative of corners. Inside of here, if we look at this, and if we go to design and look at this feature class here, this has some standard ones, and we'll go over what these are. But the biggest one is this one here. This attribute is called isFixed, and an alias of fixed shape. And this basically is a Boolean attribute, and it says, is this point a fixed point, or what we used to call a control point, or is this one that can change its coordinate values? That one attribute right there controls whether or not a point is a control point, or whether it's a standard fabric point, whether it can get moved or not moved in there. And you'll see as we build later, there's actually some attribute rules and such that will prevent points that are marked as fixed from actually moving. So that's a very critical point or critical attribute field inside the points feature class. The rest of them, for example, what type of adjustment constraints are there? These are applied for the adjustments, whether or not you want to preserve this information on here, the X, Y, Z. Again, the parcel fabric is a three-dimensional parcel fabric, so it has Z's on it. The accuracies that's set, the ellipses that are used in here, these are all required for the adjustments and such that we need on here. Note what's missing in here is that inside the ArcMap parcel fabric, there were a lot of attribute rules associated with control points to say, where did this come from? What quality is it? All that's missing inside of our points feature class for the ArcGIS parcel fabric. This is primarily, it's a transition away from that LGIM data structure, but it doesn't take all of it away. And it doesn't mean you can't use the LGIM structure, but it's a much more flexible as far as what your data structure is when you're going and building this. The next feature class that comes in is required by a parcel fabric is a records feature class. This records feature class is unique. And I'm going to go back to comparing it about ArcMap parcel fabric. The ArcMap parcel fabric had a table called a plan table. And that plan table served as the organizing table. It was, if you use the plan table, you went and created a plan, then you created everything else, and they were all associated with that plan table, that record of the plan table. And it said things such as who created it, when was it created, what does it represent, all of that. And a record is similar to that. The difference is that a record actually has a shape in it. A record has a polygon geometry associated with it. And it uses the polygon geometry for several things as it's going through. One is it uses it to find what's inside of it. It also uses it to rebuild it. There's a lot of uses for a record on here. But what you can think of is that the record is the organizing element inside the parcel fabric. Everything inside of a parcel fabric should / must have a record associated with it. If it doesn't have a record with it, there's a reason, or let's just say that this is no longer a valid feature inside the parcel fabric. All right. Record type, notice on here that there is no domain associated with record type, and there's no default values for it because it's flexible right now. You can tell it how you want to track these records and such. All right. Topology, right out of the box, a parcel fabric has topology associated with it. And if I go in here and look at this topology, it is a standard topology. Right now, it has no feature classes on it, so it's not going to have any real rules associated with it other than that my connection lines, my old origin connection lines, they have to have a point on the end of them. By default, that's the only thing that comes out here. As we start adding elements to this, you'll see that the topology starts getting built up further and further and further. All right, so then finally, here is a relationship class that says that in fact, the parcel fabric record has to have connection lines on it, or inversely, that every time you have a connection, it has a corresponding record. I don't see where this is traced a whole lot, but I know this is one that ESRI is working on to make sure that this works as well as it should be. Some of the earlier versions, some of the earlier releases of the parcel fabric did not have this element in there, this relationship class, quite as strong as the others. All right. So if we go and build a parcel fabric, we have a parcel fabric, doesn't have anything in it. It's a controller object, and it has a set of rules, and it's meant to go and follow those rules as we go. So the first thing we want to do is we want to create and say, okay, what are we going to put into our parcel fabric? And in order to do that, what we'll do is we'll right click on here on the parcel fabric and go to manage and say, let's add a new parcel type. I'm going to go in and put this over here so we can see this. Now, traditionally, I would just say, okay, let's put parcels in here. All right, parcels in here. The problem we have with this is that this is a file geodatabase, and you cannot have two feature classes with the same name. So even though they're in different feature data set, a feature data set is not necessarily a physical construct. It really doesn't have a group inside of, if you look at a file geodatabase internally. It rather is just shared properties of these layers. So a layer that's in the parcel in the feature data set is no different than one that's outside of it. So when we go to build this parcel fabric, we have to name a different name, the actual feature class, than what the original data is here. We can't have two of them with the same name on them. And if you were to do this, this feature class, which would be part of the parcel fabric, would have an _1. It'd have a suffix on the end of it for it. That's one of the things that people don't realize when they first start doing this. And in fact, it's one of those areas where you just want to watch out. After you do this for a while, you realize that, well, maybe I should create my parcel fabric in a different geodatabase, or maybe from a system integration standpoint, I want to name it differently so that I can do an ETL. There's a lot of elements in here as far as the overall design of your parcel fabric. But in this case, we're just going to go and call it parcels _PF to designate that this is inside the parcel fabric. All right. The next thing we want to look at is this administrative boundaries. And if we click on this help up here, it tells us that inside some of these later versions of the parcel fabric, it allows you to go and include inside the parcel fabric parcels that have administrative boundaries. It can be used for very large parcels, such as the country parcels or state parcels or county parcels. The parcel can have a polygon feature class, and it does not participate in the topology. And if it's checked, it's going to go and store this and not build it in the topology. If it's unchecked, it's going to keep it and build it in the topology. And there's a lot of discussion going on about whether or not you should ever have administrative boundaries. Some of my clients actually have administrative boundary polygons inside the parcel fabric. But here's the question I ask, is that an administrative boundary inside the parcel fabric requires both polygons and lines. And a lot of people put municipalities and zoning and that sort of thing inside the parcel fabric. Well, what that does is that creates lines for all those polygons. Is that feature class, is that type of polygon actually defined by lines, or is it just following the boundaries of other polygons on here? I'm not sure. And I know why ESRI put this in there. They put that in for a specific case, whether you should consider putting other polygons inside of your parcel fabric, administrative type polygons on here. I'm going to go ahead and run this. I'll keep rambling on here. Are there any questions while this is running? Anything yet? Administrative boundaries is an interesting concept. I'm just not sure it's something that a lot of people are really going to be used or really understand what the implications are, the long-term implications. Do you really want to have boundary lines for every single administrative boundary out there? All right, so what this is doing, this is building a parcel fabric feature classes, a polygon feature class and a line feature class for us. All right, so when it gets complete over here, we're going to see it. And what we see here is parcel PF, which is a polygon feature class, and lines PF. We also see a bunch of change. Well, we don't see. We see that there's a relationship class that says that our parcel polygon feature class has to have a record with it. There's also a relationship class that the lines should, and it will build records for it, for the lines. So now that we have information that the polygons and the lines for that parcel type have records associated with them. If we look at the topology, we now see that we have, we have in our parcel fabric, we have records, we have parcel points, we have connections. These are the standard ones. And then we have all of our adjustment points, adjustment vectors, adjustment lines, and we have our parcel PF, part of the parcel fabric, and we have parcel lines PF, part of the parcel fabric. So we now have multiple parcels in here. To make it more simpler, if we go here to the general, now, okay, we'll look here. So if we go to the rules, we now have topology rules as part of this parcel fabric that we just built. So the rules that we have, the first element is that the parcel fabric connection lines must have endpoints on them. We had that with the parcel fabric. As soon as we built the fabric, we had that. And then we have some new ones that we just built, that our lines have to have endpoints on them. And then that our lines must not have dangles. Our lines must not self-overlap. Our lines must not self-intersect. And our lines must be covered by the boundary of the polygons that are associated with it. And finally, we have that the polygons must be covered by lines. And if you recall, if you ever were involved in creating the ArcMap parcel fabric, those are exactly the same topology rules that are part of or required as part of the ArcMap parcel fabric to get things in. Same rules still apply. The difference is, instead of being useful for everything, these are individually used for each parcel types that are inside of here. All right, so we have, again, our connection lines. The only rule that applies to that is that it has to have an endpoint on it. And then individual parcel fabric types. We have our PF, our parcels PF, our line features have these rules. Our polygon feature class for the parcels has that one rule on it. There are no errors in here because we've not validated or done anything with this. So what we have is we have a parcel fabric that has one type of feature class in it. All right, I'm going to go and take in order to bring a parcel fabric in, what you do is just take and drag that parcel fabric into either your current map or have it go and be added into a new map. When you do that, when you add a parcel fabric into any map, it goes and automatically goes and symbolizes it for you, and it recognizes it as a parcel fabric and pulls it in there and brings it in there separately. So the thing you do not ever want to do, I'm going to create a new map here, is I do not want to go in there and say, well, I've got a new map. Let's just bring our parcels and our lines over here. That doesn't bring in the parcel fabric. These are separate. These are separate feature classes. In order to bring in and have a working parcel fabric, you must bring in that controller object for it, right? I'll often go around and see where somebody goes and loads these things in separately here and doesn't recognize the relationships. And that's not a parcel fabric. That's just a bunch of feature classes out there. So by the way, I keep referring to these things as feature classes. And in this case, this is a file geodatabase, and they are feature classes. If you go and eventually implement this on Enterprise, which uses services instead of feature classes, These would then be referenced as feature services, not as feature classes. But there are two ways to go and implement a parcel fabric in a file geodatabase or in an enterprise portal settings. All right. So let's look here and let's expand this standard table of contents in here. Inside or underneath this parcel fabric grouping, we have the records layer, records feature class layer. Right now, if I look at the attribute table, there's nothing in there. And it has the standard types of layers on here. Let's look at it this way. Data designer. By default, it turns off your object ID, turns off your shape field, shows you the name field on here and highlights it, shows you the record type, does not highlight it, shows you the recorded date and highlights that, hides the length, area, global ID, created by editor tracking here, and then a parcel count field, turns that on. Interestingly, a parcel count field inside of a record. That's a new field that came in, I think it was 2.5, maybe it came in. Because a record is not a unique one-to-one relationship between a parcel and a record. It can be, but a record can also hold multiple things. For example, when you're building a CSM, you would create a record for the CSM, and then that record would go and organize everything that's created under it. The CSM boundary, the individual roads, the tracks, the lots, all of things inside of there, maybe even easements, they would all be built using that same record. So a record can have multiple parcels associated with it, multiple types of parcels associated with it. That's the record feature class in here. The rest of these, the dirty areas, point errors, line errors, and polygon errors, these are topology elements on here, because remember, this parcel fabric has a topology built for it. By default, usually when we are editing inside the parcel fabric, we keep that parcel fabric group turned off. We really don't interact with it much at all. The line feature class, again, let's just look at this a little bit more. This has, again, inside of here, it goes and turns on your object ID and shape. It has created by record and retired by record. These two fields become very, very important. And you'll see this here as we start looking at these other feature classes that are built inside of here. We've stated that the concept is that a parcel fabric is going to use records to organize things together. And the parcel fabric record has a polygon associated with it, and it has a global ID as a sort of master identifier. The global ID is what controls everything and what ties everything together, so that when we have a parcel and when we have a record, anything that's created and organized under that record contains the global ID of that record. Anything that's deleted while that record is active contains the global ID, but doesn't contain it in the created by record. It contains it in the retired by record, so that the global IDs that are stored inside of these two control everything inside of here. And to just sort of demonstrate that real quickly, because again, I have this here. Let me go and pull over these parcels just to make sure that I'm in the right area when I do this. And let's zoom into this. Okay. That's all I really needed with that. So let's actually start editing something. Let's see how this parcel fabric thing works. So this here is called the heads up display for my records. And I could say, let's create a record on here. And this is an interesting point. Remember when we said that the only real information that's important in the record is that global ID. It doesn't matter what you name this. Doesn't matter any of the other attributes that are on here. It's always going to use the global ID. You don't get to pick that. That's automatically assigned by the system. So it doesn't matter what you call that other than for your own organizing viewpoint. So I created a record and it's now going to start actually going and let's open up my attributes. It's actually going to start tracking what I create. So let's go to create here and let's go to a parcel fabric, or excuse me, to a parcel polygon. And I'm going to create a parcel polygon. This polygon, if I look in here, has its own object ID. It has a global ID. Well, it turns out this global ID that's in here, excuse me, it has its global ID. This created by record global ID, that's the global ID of this record that I have here. To prove that, let's open up this one. Let's turn on the global ID so we can see it. There it is there. And I'm going to have to save this right now before I can go and save that. Okay. So now this polygon that I just created has its own global ID, but it also contains the global ID from the record that was used to go and build it. So it's tracking the global ID of the record that was active when I built this. That's the key. That's the Rosetta Stone to the parcel fabric. Is the global ID of the record, and it's going to use that over and over and over again. So if I go in here and say, okay, well, let's go and create some lines. And I create these lines and I select them. Those lines, when I look, and if I look at what is common through all of these records, it's that created by global ID. It goes and marks everything that's created at this time while this record is active, marks everything with that global ID of the active record. I'll go a little bit further. Let's select that and delete it. Now, it really didn't delete it. Actually, it did delete it because I didn't mark it historic. Sorry. Live demo. Let's take this and back to my modify and set that as historic. It didn't delete it. It actually just set it as historic. And if I go and select this now, I will see that not only does it say that it created it, but it also retired it. It marked it as historic. All right. Again, this is the Rosetta Stone for how everything works inside of here. Let me go and delete all of these out of here. Okay, let me take this one again. Let's demonstrate really what the parcel fabric is doing. It's not just organizing it, but it's actually applying and making sure that the rules are complied with. that it goes and it complies with every rule that's defined as part of this parcel. And remember, we said that a parcel has, let's go in here and look at the properties. And it has inside of here, the rules are that it has to have a record associated with it. It has to have lines on top of it, and the lines have to have points on the end of them. Well, right now, I have a polygon that's not in compliance with any of those rules. It has a polygon, but it has no lines, has no points or anything on it. So when I tell it to go and build my active record, when I tell it to go and do this, it will go and automatically create the lines and create the points for that polygon that I created. And that happened quickly, so I don't know whether, but you actually can see that there are lines on here now. There are points on here now. And it goes and makes sure that everything that you're building with the parcel fabric is in full compliance with the rules. Doesn't imply a whole lot right now, but as we start building this during the day, you're seeing that the rules that we established define how that parcel is created. All right. Right now, at minimal, it says it defines the structure. Every polygon has to have lines around the boundary. Those lines have to have corners on the ends of them. The lines can't be overlapping, can't be self-intersecting. You know, all these rules are here. It makes sure that it goes and builds them. Same way, if we were to go in here and say, well, let's just build some lines again. We can build these lines in here. And I can say, well, let's go ahead and build this. It's not going to build anything else because it's not sure that I want to create a polygon out of this. In order to create a polygon, I create what's called a seed. And that seed is, this is really big. That seed actually tells the parcel fabric that there's supposed to be a polygon inside of there. So I can tell it to build it. It says, you've got a record that has polygons. Make sure that polygon all has lines on it. Or you've got a record that has a seed. Make sure that that seed is built out so it goes all the way out to the lines. Any questions on this? None? All right. I'm going to discard everything. I'll also take care of this. Delete this. Delete this. And I'm going to go to manage. And I'm going to go and delete my record. All right, I'm back to a clean parcel fabric on here. And I have here my parcel types. Disregard this. This is, let's rename this original parcels to be migrated. So let's look a little bit more at the table of contents. Inside the table of contents, every parcel type that we create is going to have its own grouping. Right? Again, when I talk about parcel types, I go back here to manage, and here we can do it here. Parcel types, there's my parcel type on here. Every parcel type will have its own grouping of layers. The grouping of layers will be first a line and then the polygon on it. But in addition, you're going to have historic line and historic polygons. Each of these have definition queries against them. The line feature class says, if I'm looking for my current lines that are parcel lines, make sure that my attribute field retired by record doesn't have anything in it. Same way with polygons. When I go in here, make sure that my retired by record doesn't have anything in it, that it's null. If I look at my historic, all that definition query says is that make sure that my line feature class that has something in it. Doesn't mean it's a valid record or anything. It just means it has something in it. It has a global user ID in there of some sort. Same way with polygons. Make sure there's something in the retired record on there so it works. So let's talk about the second key to the parcel fabric. We talked about the first key to the parcel fabric is that record is organizing everything in there. That record is stamping its global ID over everything. The second piece of the Rosetta Stone is that all feature classes inside the parcel fabric have definition queries set against them to organize them whether or not they have an attribute stored in the retired by record. All right. If they have something in the retired by record, it means that that's a historic parcel and to put it in this other grouping versus the current grouping. That's the way it works. So that's all it is to it. All right. Do we have any questions about the structures on what's in here right now or how these work? Anything yet? No. See, I would have thought somebody would have had a question on this. It can't be that. I didn't do that good a job of explaining this because I know I was rambling as I was going. So what about records? What about in here? Does this have a retired by? No. A record has its own in here. A record is the key and the organizer. A record always is active. It's always something that's in there. All right. Okay, so we've got a structure in place. That structure right now is set up for default attributes. Let's go in here and look at these. These are the required attribute fields for a parcel fabric. It has, again, global ID, has an object ID, a global ID, a shape field. Always going to have those. Has a name field. ESRI still likes using that name field, and they use that multiple places. It has a created by record. Again, that's the record global ID that was used and active when it was created. Has a retired by record, the global ID of the record that was active when it was deleted. It has stated area. Stated area probably should be more called deeded area on here. That's the stated area. Stated area unit. So here's an interesting thing. The stated area field is a double word. It's a number. Stated area unit is actually a long integer. And let's look, there's actually a domain associated with that. And if we look at what values there are in this domain, it's everything from hectares to acres to US acres, square meters, square feet using Clark, square fathom, square chains, square miles, goes on and on and on. Square feet, Indian projections, yards, goes on and on and on. And it uses that coded value domain for PF_areas. Let's look at that domain for a minute. That is this PF area units on here. And if we look at this, I did tell you, I did warn you, we were really going to dig into this, didn't I? That this is really, really not going to look what it is, but why it's in there and why are we doing this? So inside the coded value domain for the area units, that stated area units, there's actually a code that's used, a 6-digit code that's used to figure out what value to show back to you. Acres is 109,402, square feet is 109,405. So often I'm asked, can I get rid of all these if I'm not going to ever use them? The reality is you could, but then you want to watch out the next time you do an upgrade of the data set, the odds are it's going to put them in again. When you do that, just be aware. You can modify this, but be careful with it because the odds are it's going to run it again on there. So that's a domain in here for this. And again, that's for the stated area. There's also one called calculated area. Now, calculated area goes and has basically the value that's stored in the shape area, but because it's not automatically defined, you can actually have this calculated each time. Again, it represents the shape of that polygon or polygons that are part of that one parcel. So why would you have a separate field for the area of the polygon or polygons? Why not just use the shape area on here? There's a lot of clients that have a rule that says if a parcel is more than 1 acre, just calculate the acreage. But if it's less than 1 acre, calculate the square footage of it. And what this allows you to do, having this separate attribute field in here, is it allows you to go and define what type of things do I want to calculate for this? Not just taking the area of this polygon, but tell me, have a rule set. Why am I doing it that way? Why am I storing that value in here and not just storing the shape area? Again, because you can have a rule internally what value you're actually going to go and store. Again, the most common one is if it's greater than 1 acre in size, go and calculate and store for me the area in acres of that polygon. But if it's less than that, store it as square footage instead. All right. Let's go down further. Misclosure ratio. Misclosure ratio actually deals only with parcels that are described as a meets and bounds parcel. So if you have a sectional breakdown description, it doesn't calculate a misclosure because it doesn't necessarily need meets and bounds information to go and build that parcel. If you've got an aliquot of some sort, it doesn't have misclosure. If you've got simultaneous conveyance types of parcels where you've got lots or parcels created in the CSM, they don't have misclosures. So recognize that this misclosure distance, misclosure ratio only comes into play when you have parcels that are described using a meets and bounds method. It could do it for the overall boundary of a CSM, or it could do it for a plat of survey or an overall subdivision. But the misclosure ratio, and this is the point I'm trying to get across, albeit really I'm going circuitously to that. Unlike the ArcMap parcel fabric, not every parcel has a misclosure distance, or misclosure ratio. That's not part of this parcel fabric structure. It's only if it's a meets and bounds description that it has it. All right. By the way, Jeremiah, I like that. So Jeremiah actually says that he never fathomed that there would be so many units available. We were just talking about the square fathoms and such. You're right. I never fathomed it either. And again, that brings up an interesting point, though, is that we in the United States are very parochial. We think about our situation, but this parcel fabric is actually being deployed across the world. I'm actually working with a partner to go and deploy this over in the Caribbean, and that does not use the same rules as we use. So that's the reason for all those domains. That's the reason why a lot of what we think should happen doesn't happen by itself automatically. It's just, part of what they've got. So the next attribute field that we're looking at inside the polygon is seed. This tells it whether or not, this tells the software whether or not this polygon, this seed, should be expanded out, whether or not the group of lines is intending to be a polygon or not. Let's go back here again and look at this and examine this a little bit more. So I can go in here and I can draw a series of lines. And just, sort of graphically do that. And then I could go in there and I could say, oh, I forgot to create a record, didn't I? Oh my gosh. By the way, most of the times I do this, I do it on purpose. Sometimes I do it by mistake. But this is just I'll use this to illustrate. The record is the organizing element. If you don't have a record, you can't use any of the parcel fabric elements. You must have a record active that it's going to use to track this. I created a bunch of lines. Do I have to go back and recreate them now? No. I can create a record here, and then I can say, I can select these lines, and I can pull down this and say, assign those lines to my record. It went and calculated the global ID of that record and put it on every one of those features that I had selected. So again, I went and retrofitted a series of lines to a record. Now I can go in here and say, create some seeds in here. It creates 3 seeds. I can go in here and select this seed. And by the way, this is a polygon. It just has really weird geometry on it. It basically is just a circle. It's an insertion, or it's the beginning of a polygon. It is a polygon. The only difference is that this attribute here says this is a seed. This is a seed. This is the beginning of a polygon. This is not a full-blown polygon. I'm going to delete that seed. And I'm going to go and illustrate again that when I do a build, what it does is it says, look at every single record, or look at my active record and test to see, do I have a polygon or a seed associated with it? If I do, build it out to the lines that comply with it. Make sure it fits the rules. If I have a polygon and it doesn't have lines, it goes and builds the lines. So the parcel fabric does nothing but enforce the rules. So I'm going to say build. It will go and build these 2 polygons, but because we did not have a seed here, it did not build this polygon that can exist as just lines inside this record on here. The rule is that the features have to have a record. It doesn't say that all closed lines have to have a polygon associated with them. All right. So let me go and discard that again. Let me go and discard that. Let me save all this here. Let me go back to here. So on the parcels polygon feature class, I have an isSeed attribute. And again, it's either yes or no. By default, it's set to no. All right, the next 4 attributes are editor tracking. By default, your parcel fabric must have editor tracking turned on. Okay, must have editor tracking turned on. However, just as, I'm not going to tell that joke. These are not the same editor tracking fields as was in the ArcMap parcel fabric. These are sort of the new attribute, the new editor tracking fields on here. But it does have, and it must have editor tracking turned on. Then you've got standard shape length, shape area, and then you've got an attribute field called validation status. This actually has to do with a validation attribute rule. We'll talk about that this afternoon, but that tells the software whether or not this polygon has been tested to make sure it complies with all the validation rules on here. Talk about that later. All right, so in here, I have, these are the standard ArcGIS parcel fabric rules, or excuse me, attributes on here. Notice this was the original parcels in here. And if I go and look at this and say, pull this thing up, none of these are in here. None of these are in here. So I have to go and move them over and make sure that I accommodate my existing schema inside the parcel fabric. That brings up a really good point though. This is maybe the third secret to the parcel fabric, the third portion of the Rosetta Stone. The reality is you can keep exactly the same schema in your feature classes that you're using right now. You don't have to, but you can. So I could go and take these attribute fields and copy them and say, let's put them into my parcel fabric so that when I bring my parcel polygons in, I'm going to include those attributes and I'm going to continue to maintain those attributes for me as I've got them in here. So let's close this out. And I'm going to save this new structure, this new schema for my parcel polygons on here. Any questions yet? Come on, guys, you got to ask questions. Does it copy over the domains? Yes. Can I have subtypes? Yes, you can have all of those. There's not a dramatic change in the schema between what you maintain now and what you can want or may want to continue to go and maintain inside the parcel fabric. You can maintain the same schema. Granted, you've got all these other feature classes or these other attribute tables in them. You've got these other attribute fields on them, but you can maintain your existing schema if you wish to. If you wish to. All right. So let's turn this on. By the way, that's the reason why those seeds were so big. So here's my existing parcels the ones I want to go and create and make into my parcel fabric. So if I go and open up the attribute table on here and look at these, I can see the pins. There's these other attributes, some of which are populated. All right, it looks like they're almost all populated. They may not be consistent. This one here, nope, this one, this H units, doesn't look like it has anything in it. Probably is intending to be housing units, but we're going to keep it in there anyway, just for this. So what we're going to do is we're going to go and take these parcels, these polygons, and load them into our parcel fabric. All right. There's a geoprocessing tool called Append that we're going to go and use on here. And this is going to tell us, well, what do we want to append? In this case, we're going to append our original parcels, and we're going to put them into our parcels PF. Really, really important is this next step, is the field matching type. If I keep it where the input fields must match the target fields, is going to fail because the fields don't match. They are different schemas between them. Instead, what I wanted to do is I wanted to go and create a field map and say, if I don't have an attribute that goes into this a new field, give me the option to figure out what to do with it. So I'll go ahead and click on that, and it will tell me what fields it does have. They're marked in black, and what fields I don't have on here. This is very important. You must do this. So let's just say I want to go and take the name field, and I want to take this pin number and put it over there. In order to do that, I highlight or select that pin number and say, make it the pin, and add that. You must click on that add selected field. This right on the bottom here, you have to click that for it to work. And you go through all these others and fix them as you want. In this case, we have nothing else that corresponds, but I'm going to hit go ahead and run. Notice I also have, I can undo this if I don't like it. I'm just going to go and I'm going to tell it to go and import these polygons in here. So any questions yet? Any comments? Anything that, any observations on here? You guys are really going to make me talk to the screen for this long, huh? This append, you want to be careful with it. If you do this out of the catalog, sometimes the polygons don't come in. Sometimes the polygons come in and the attributes don't come in. There's a lot of different variations on the way you set this up. Do I go and set the target data set first and then the input data set later? There's a lot of variations in here in the way you set it up. What I have found consistently is the best way to do this is have both of these feature classes in a map document and do it from there. And that seems to be the most consistent way. Now that I've said that, let me open this thing up. Well, it is there. Let me open up the attributes and see and make sure that everything came in. And in fact, the name field came in, which is good. Note state created by records, not built yet. Retired by records, not there. Because I haven't really built any of this stuff yet. I've just sort of loaded those polygons in. Stated area is not calculated. Stated area unit's not calculated. Calculated area is not. Nothing is calculated yet. Misclosure distances, nothing. The seeds are made by default. It is tracking me. It is tracking me and tracking everything I'm doing here. And Validation status is set up because there's nothing there. Here's these original attributes that are in here. So it looks like it came in correctly. Everything came in correctly. You want to make sure that that happens. There's no lines. There's no points. There's no records. The next thing I have to do is I have to go through here and prepare it for the parcel fabric. I have to say, okay, well, what's the first thing I need? I need a record with everything. So I'm going to go and run a geoprocessing tool called Create Parcel Records on here. Now I have to tell, well, what feature am I going to create records off of? In this case, I'm going to create it off of these parcels underscore PF. Then the question is, okay, so what am I going to name this thing? How am I going to name it? And there's two options here. I can just say, just take the value that's stored in a field and use that, or I can go and calculate an expression. This expression is an arcade expression. If you have not been exposed to arcade yet, get exposed to it. You will be using it in ArcGIS Pro no matter what. Learn arcade. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to build a record, and I'm going to go and set it up just so that this record for the name field has stored on it that this was one of the original migrated data, and put in place there the name field or the pin field as the name of this. So I will tell it that this is migrated data, and this was the original parcel polygon that was used it. And in arcade, again, this is arcade here. If I wish to add a string value, I go and enclose that string value in quotes, either single quotes or double quotes. And then I use a plus sign to concatenate that with something else in here. And I could say, well, we'll use it with the object ID, or in this case, I'm going to be a little different and just say, just take the value of the pin field. And this is an arcade notation saying $ feature means for every object, look at the value that's stored in the pin field of that object. That's what that $ feature dot pin is. It's a notation saying for every object, take the value that's stored in the pin field and append that to migrated underscore. I can go ahead and validate that. Yes, this is good arcade code. This will work. Now, again, I could do a whole bunch of things with this. I can, if these were lot polygons, conveyance division polygons, all right, using the LGIM terminology, I could tell it to go and append not just the lot number, but I could tell it using arcade to go and intersect the subdivision in which that's located, the subdivision or the simultaneous conveyance in which that's located, and take the SIMCON name and add that with a separator to the lot name. So I could tell, as part of this calculation, tell me where this lot is located, not just what it is, but where it's located using arcade. Arcade using an element called feature sets and using the arcade intersect functions against those feature sets. Arcade is an absolutely amazing scripting language. Again, you're going to find that used throughout the Parcel Fabric and ArcGIS Pro. You should learn how to use it. All right, I'll go ahead and run this. It's going to create records for me just to verify I have the one record that I created initially. All right, let's go ahead and delete that record. I don't want that one anymore, but I have no records on here. It's another thing you don't do. I almost just did it. When you're creating records, do not have your record table open. It will give you a lock error, meaning that it can't add things there because you've got it open and have locked that table. Keep the record table closed. Let's go ahead and migrate these and create records for everything. So, Carmen, thank you. Thank you for asking your question, Carmen. Carmen wants to know, does the parcel fabric, does the Pro Parcel Fabric, by the way, ESRI does not call this the Pro Parcel Fabric. They call it the ArcGIS Parcel Fabric. And it's not, by the way, it's not it's not Arc Pro, it's ArcGIS Pro. If you want to get some ESRI people upset, just start calling it Arc Pro and Pro Parcel Fabric. No. All right. So Carmen says, does the Pro Fabric allow for multiple editors? And the answer is yes, with a big caveat on there. All right. You can deploy the Pro Fabric with multiple editors, but you cannot do it in SDE. You must do it with Portal and web services. All right, so you have to publish this using your Portal implementation. Once you publish it, yes, then they can attach to those published services and edit them as services. This is one of these first generation of solutions that are using web services and no longer client server implementations on here. So the answer is yes, but not with SDE. Okay. All right. Let's see what happened here. Let's go in here and let's go to records and let's open up the attribute table. And I now have a whole bunch of attributes. And these attributes, excuse me, these records all say migrated, which is the text I appended to it, and then a dash, and then the parcel number, the PIN number. It says nothing about the record type, nothing about the record date. They all have been assigned a global ID. They all have been defined as far as the date that these records were created. And then finally, it tells me how many parcels are part of that record. Now, interesting, I never checked. Let's go and see. We actually have a couple of parcels here. We have Bark River here, which was 2 parcels in here. We also have another one here, which is a multi-part polygon, which has 2 parcels in here. So the next question is, can the ArcGIS Parcel Fabric contain multi-part polygons? Because if you recall, the ArcMap Parcel Fabric always had a problem with them. The answer is yes, you can have multi-part polygons on here. All right, you can. Still a little funky once in a while when you're doing clips, but it can do multi-part polygons on here. So I now have records. If I go in here, I still don't see any lines. I don't see any corners in here at all either. So if I look at my parcel lines, oh, there's no parcel lines created yet. So while I may have migrated those polygons in there and I created records for them, I still did not create this. I still have not built this parcel fabric yet. to be everything that it needs to be. It hasn't validated anything on here. So let's go out here and I guess I shut that down, didn't I? Go and open up our geoprocessing again. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say and build my parcel fabric. All right. Now remember, again, a build is nothing more than that controller object looking at the records table and saying, if I have a polygon here, does that polygon have lines on it? And if it doesn't have lines on it, we'll build the lines. Does it have corners on the ends of those lines? If it doesn't have corners on the ends of those lines, it will build those corners for me. It will automatically create them. That's all the parcel fabric does, is it checks the rules to make sure that they are complied with. All right, so now let's go in here and say parcel fabric, and the extent I wanted to go and build my entire parcel fabric, build all of these out. All right, and say run. So it will go through and build these, and it'll take a couple of minutes to do that. All right. Any questions? Any comments yet? Anything in here? Now, by the way, this is usually where ESRI kind of stops. It says, nah, okay, you have a parcel fabric now, and you can work with this. Yes, you can, but there's a whole bunch of things in here that are nowhere near being complete. It's nowhere near something that you can actually work with. It's not done yet. It's not fully baked. It is a parcel fabric, yes, and it has records in it, yes, but it is not fully baked in here yet. And that's where you want to make sure that you talk to somebody or contract with somebody who knows what they're doing to actually flesh out all of this. There's lots of little gotchas in here that you want to make sure that it takes care of this. Things such as, do you wish to continue with your current schema? If you're using the ArcMap parcel fabric, do you want to continue with that LGIM? If you do, there's a whole lot of cleanup that has to be done on that. You have to get rid of all those extra attribute fields that are in there. Then you have to think about whether you want to go and continue with that schema the way it was, or maybe you want to convert over. Interestingly, is that we're having several clients ask us, well, we really are using the LGIM publishing, not the editing, because we want to make sure that we can use this data for all of our apps, our maps and our apps that are created off of those publishing feature classes. Can we take those publishing feature classes and use those schemas instead of these? And the answer is yes. If you do that, then you really don't have to go through the ETL that you do out of the editing into the publishing on here. So there's a lot of questions, a lot of strategic planning that you want to think about when you're going and looking to migrate this in. By all means, what I would suggest is that whatever you do, do it in a parcel fabric, make sure it's valid, make sure it's correct. And then once you're comfortable with it, then just bring it over to your enterprise and publish that out as from Portal. While this is doing this, and I'm sorry this is taking so long. I wanted to do with a full data set though, not something that only had 1,200 parcels in it. I want you to get a feel for what this actually looks like on here. Any questions on here? Anything? You're going to see me asking that all day until, unless we start getting some additional questions in here. So let me ask you something else. Is everybody excited about the trivia Thursday night?
Definitely.
Yeah, yeah. Hopefully you can all participate. We're not quite sure how many teams we're going to have, but we'll see. Because we don't have a sign up. You show up Thursday night, you can do that. We're going to enable teams. So, and we'll enable breakout rooms if you want. If people that are not in the same location, you can have a breakout room and move in there to answer questions. It usually takes about, because we have 7 different categories of questions. Each of those categories has 10 questions associated with it. And we have everything from, let me see if I can remember what they are, general knowledge. There's Green Bay Packers. There's WLIA trivia. There are beers. Who can identify the beers that are in here? There's an audio round, which has sort of ask you to listen to and see if you can identify some songs that have a word in them. Then we have GIS trivia, and we have Wisconsin cheese trivia. So we've got enough of those. And there are prizes. Right now, the prize is set at 75 for first place team, 50 for second, and 25 for the third place. We're thinking we may up that a little bit, maybe going to 100 to 75 and 50. We'll have to see what sort of turnout we get there. And those prizes, by the way, are going to be Amazon gift cards so that you can go and we could just send it to you by email. All right, it looks like it's finished. So how do we know it's finished? Well, we have a whole bunch of points in there, don't we? We have a lot of points in here. And I'm going to zoom in here. And now what I'll find is that we have some points in here. We have points, we have lines in here. We have some early symbology set on here. Let's talk about what's not here and some of the things we're going to find in here also. So the first thing we find is that as we zoom in and out, and again, right now I'm at 1575 and I zoom out to 2000, and those little tick marks on our lines, as we zoom out to 2000, they disappear. It turns out that what the Parcel fabric has implemented is scale-based symbology. And that scale-based symbology, if we go over here and look at this, at 2000 scale, all right, it's just a straight line. But as we move in, suddenly you'll see, oh, wait a minute. As we zoom in our scale a little bit, suddenly the symbology becomes, it's got endpoints on it and such. And that's a little disconcerting when you first start using this thing because of the way it's set. Where maybe you're going in and doing a big parcel and suddenly you lose all the endpoints on here. We're going to talk this afternoon about how do you configure that on here. And hopefully that will help you a little bit. But scale-based symbology is set so that as we zoom out, the symbology changes on here. What we'll also find is that, well, if there are densified curves inside of this data set, it does not solve any densified curves. Things like this here. This is all a series of small lines and such that are on here. By the way, we could have, if we wanted to, in order to work with that, we could have merged points on here or merged the lines on here if we had a line feature class for that, so that it doesn't have those elements on here, all those individual small points on here. You can have a riparian area on here. But again, these are more densified curves in here, more densified curves in here. You can very quickly see some of the deficiencies in your data when you bring this in. And I'm not looking at this to point anybody's data out. Everybody has skeletons, so don't worry about it. So let's go and explore that one thing I just said earlier about having areas that don't necessarily have all these small lines on them. I'm going to go in and I'm going to remember to create a record right now. I'm going to create a record. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and start editing. I'm going to go to create. I'm going to create a series of lines. All right. And I have two options here. I can create just sort of regular polylines, and I can also create 2-point lines. If I create polylines in here, or I go to streaming, I can go and do streaming, and I can finish this part. I can stop streaming and go back to a regular on here. I can go to 2-point lines. I can input bearing and distance. I can go in here and finish this line. It's a series of lines in here. I can say, go ahead and build a seed. There's my seed and say, build this. And when I build it, oh, it actually did create individual ones in there. Let's make sure. Oh, so that streaming didn't work on here. I actually went and rasterized those. Ah, so let's discard that. So you can actually go and create these without I'm thinking here. I'm looking for my points and my lines. It's almost like it didn't create them anymore. Like I undid them. I discarded those without saving them. These should not have been part of my edit. Sorry about that. Live demo. I should not have done that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and look at my history. I'm going to just rebuild that parcel fabric again. Sorry about that. I did not mark enable undo, so it shouldn't have saving it. It should have automatically been validated on here. It's okay. So Jeremiah said you're going to miss the start of trivia. It's all right. The key is just go and get yourself on a team, let them answer the early ones, and then you come back and be the white knight coming in and giving them all the answers at the end, right? So, yeah, sorry about that. You can tell that none of this is scripted. This is completely off the cuff. So,
if somebody has a trivia team, I'll be happy to join it. I just won't be available for the beginning, but I'd like to play. I just don't want, obviously I would bring a team down because they're going to be short a member for a while.
Yeah. Well, I could share with you that my family and I have been doing trivia for 6 months now. Every week we have a trivia question using Zoom and a trivia contest, and it's a lot of fun. Takes about 3 hours, and for the most part, the categories are so diverse that there's not one, your strength in one category is is not going to help you in other categories. I can share with you that in my family, in the family group that we use, and it's families and friends from all over the country and everywhere from Portland and Seattle to Florida and Texas and Washington, D.C. and everything. The one team that consistency scores up on the top is they've got the patriarch, my brother, who really likes sports. So he gets all the sports answers. And then we've got his wife, who goes and kind of follows some of the cultural elements on there. So they have a good team there. And then they've got an 18-year-old son who knows all the current, really, really current stuff. So they sort of, the three of them, they have all the bases covered. So if you want to go and put together a really good team, make sure you look at those categories and have some strong people in each of those categories. I think the unknowns are going to be the general knowledge and the, I think the GIS is going to be a little bit, there's some tough questions in there. I'm going to make sure we save this afterwards. Sorry. So let me ask, has anyone started experimenting with the ArcGIS parcel fabric in which to share their experiences on here? I know Cindy is here. I see some people that are in our usual workshops on here. Only demos. Well, let me go while I'm waiting on this, and we can let this wait. Let me go in here and I'll put a little sales pitch in here for this. So when the pandemic hit, one of the things that we did is we recognized that we weren't going to be able to go and see everybody as much as possible. So we immediately started strategizing, what can we do? How can we sort of still stay in touch with you, and how can we help you understand? So we provide workshops. And these are anywhere from 2 to 3 workshops a month. Right? And we have workshops that are dedicated to ArcGIS Pro. And this is the first Thursday of every month. We have an ArcGIS Pro workshop. And it's everything from making a web map to attribute rules and simple labels and curves and feature templates, topology, and adjusting features and symbology, editing tools and interface for Pro, and introduction and setup. Those are the ones we've done so far. And then we also have Parcel Fabric workshops. And this is the third Thursday, except this month, the third Thursday is going to be actually during WLIA. So we have postponed this one back to the following Thursday. So it'll be the fourth Thursday. And in here, we talk about everything from what changes have occurred in the fabric to adjustments and alignments and building subdivisions, and just going on through all these. Each of these workshops is 90 minutes long. They're all 90 minutes long. And most importantly, well, let's go down to deep dives. Deep dives, these are the fun workshops. Nancy Von Meyer, who I hope to see here during this week. Nancy and I have had a couple discussions about land records. These are a lot of fun. We get to talk about them. Parcel Drafter, Vector Tiles, Model Builder, Story Maps, Arcade, Data Designer. So, but the key is that all of these workshops, these 90-minute workshops, are all free. All you have to do is sign up. And every one of these pages at the very bottom of them has sign me up. You just sign up. There's a form, minimal information, your email address, your name, your last name, the organization. That's all we care about. We're not going to use this for marketing, believe it or not. This is just to make sure that we find a way to securely send you these links for this. And so that will help a lot. Please sign up if you haven't signed up already. This is and to reinforce this again, this is free training, and it is highly interactive, in which you ask questions. We start off with a general topic, and as we proceed through there, it comes down to, okay, let's start asking questions, and you participate and you guide where these workshops go. We'll go and explore anything you want to give you whatever answers. So again, going through this is now built. Let's make sure that I save this project and that I save my edits and not undo them anymore. All right. And again, some of the things you want to watch out for is when this migrates over, it will do things like you got to recognize you'll have scale dependent symbology. And if you've got densified curves in there, they will not be corrected in there. They can be corrected inside of Pro. If I have time later this afternoon, I may show you how to do that. And go through here. The other thing is that the lines that it does go and bring in here, they do not have COGO values on them. None of them have COGO values on them at all. So if you've got COGO lines in here, and if you want to preserve them, there are certain techniques that you have to do to make sure that COGO values come across. Depending upon where you have COGO stored, if you have it in ArcMap COGO or ArcGIS Pro COGO, there's additional iterations because ArcMap COGO fields are string values. ArcGIS Pro COGO fields are actually number fields. So there's got to be a conversion for that also. All right. So again, this is a parcel fabric. I can go in here and I can actually start creating parcels if I want. I go over here, create a record, and then I can go in here and actually start creating and inputting either just a polygon, building a polygon on here, and then telling it to go and build the lines and the corners for me on here. All right, come on. There we go. And you can see we've got lines and corners on here now. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about the way this brings in all of this information. So let's turn off this and let's select lines and see. I am seeing a slight slowdown in my computer right now, and I suspect it might be doing an interim backup for the day. Yeah, be careful with that. So on here, when I imported it by taking the lines and told it to go and take and build these for each of these, one of the differences between the ArcMap parcel fabric and the ArcGIS parcel fabric is that each parcel, each record does not have its own set of lines. It can share lines between records. All right, so it depends upon how it's built as far as whether or not you wind up with one line here that's associated with one record, or you have a line that's used by this record and this record, what they call shared lines. Whether you have overlapping lines or shared lines, it depends upon how it's built. If I build this, let's go back here to where I was before. All right. put this on. So I am waiting for this. Again, I'm going to reboot my computer during lunchtime. So on here, I have my parcel fabric. I have one line. Let's go ahead and unselect this. Sorry about this. So I'm creating just a one line in here. I just want to make sure it's one line in here. When I created a polygon and I told it to go and create my lines by doing the build on it, it created one line on top of each. So traditionally, again, I'm going to use the same record here. I would create one record. I would go and build lines for that record. Yep. Sorry for this delay. I would create lines for that record. Live demos. Come on. All right, let's go. And delete that out. All right, so I have one parcel in here. If I create the seed, then tell it to go ahead and build this parcel. So if I create one parcel at a time, if I have basically, if I'm doing parcels and they're mostly meets and bounds parcels, if I go and create another parcel here, all right, I go and create a new record. This new record will have its own set of lines. So it will have its own set of lines here. Come on. I am so sorry. Wow. Sorry. Sorry about this. So if I go in here and say, we'll go and build a parcel where you've got these additional lines on here. All right, can I build a parcel adjacent to this? And the answer is no. When I go to create the seeds, the lines associated with this record, again, if I say select the lines associated with this record, the lines associated with this record do not build a closed polygon in here. So it will not create a seed on here. I must go and close this out. I'm not even sure this is going to go and close because it's not snapping. No, it's not snapped on here. Sorry. Wow. All right, let's go and create. You know what, Carmen, let's take a break here. Can we take a break? Give me 10 minutes. I'm going to reboot this machine and see what's going on here because it's just very frustrating at the moment.
Yeah, most definitely we can take a break.
Let's take a break until maybe noon or excuse me, 11 o'clock your time.
Okay. Sounds good. About
8 to 10 minute break. All right. I'm going to stop sharing. All right.
Thanks for clarifying, Frank. Break till noon. Thanks for clarifying the break till noon.
Yeah.
Time zone.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to stop my share and I'm going to turn off my webcam and I'm going to reboot this. Actually, I have to reboot the whole thing. I'll have to get back into your meeting from there. All right.
Okay. Yeah, sounds good.
Thank you.
We'll see you in a bit.
Bye.
Okay. Over our break here, I'll play some slides. I'll try and get some music working and we'll see everyone in 7 to 8 minutes after the break.
I am back. Is anybody else back?
Yep, all set.
Good. I'm sorry about that. I can't tell you what I think it is. I think it was a Microsoft Windows update being downloaded. So sorry about that. We've all experienced that, right?
Yes.
All right. I hopefully have taken care of that for a while. All right. So as I was starting to talk about the fact that there's two different ways in which the parcel fabric can go and manage your lines. If in fact we do one parcel at a time. All right, so if I go in here and I go to my parcel lines and I tell it I want to do 2-point lines in here. All right, and I go in here and I do a seed, and then I go and tell it to build this. It goes and builds it. And then I go in and I create a new record. And then with that new record, I go and I create another set of lines on top of here. And this is sort of replicating what you would do if you would have each of these being a separate transaction. I have a new deed of conveyance. I create a new meets and bounds parcel in here, or I create a new parcel, create the seeds for that, then I go and build it. When I do that, I actually wind up with two different lines on here. All right, and go in here and look at my attribute table. And I have two lines, one that's created with this record and one that's created with a different record. Two different lines. These are overlapping lines. And this is usually the way your parcels, your tax parcels would be maintained, is that if there was a separate meets and bounds description, you would utilize that for going and building it. And so the reason why I want to go and make sure that you understand this is that, for example, if I have a parcel here and I go to create lines, if I go in here and say I wish to go and build a parcel there, all right, if I go and tell it to create the seed, again, the seed is analyzing the lines to see if these are closed lines. It does not create a seed for me. I can click this, it doesn't create a seed. Why does it not create a seed? Because in here, if I tell it to show me everything that's associated with my record, it turns out that I don't have a line here that's associated with this record. I can put a line here, and when I put a line there and tell it to create the seeds, then it creates it and it builds it. So for certain types of parcel types, you will have overlapping lines. Other types, you will not have overlapping lines. You'll have a shared line between them. What type of a parcel would that be? That would be, for example, a PLSS section, parcel, in that they don't have really two different lines. They have one line that's shared between them. So I could create two polygons in there. These could in fact be two sections of land. They could also be two conveyance division parcels in here. And when I create seeds, it will create them both. And when I build them, it will build them both. But when I go down here and look, there's only one line between the two. So within the parcel fabric, there are two different ways in which lines are utilized and created on here. One is where they are separate because of the way these parcels are created, how they came into existence. And that's probably a better way of describing it, where they came into existence. If they came into existence one and then one and then one and then one, they will have two lines, one for each of those sort of births or each one of those records. If, however, they came into existence all at once, or a better way of saying it might be if they came in with a simultaneous conveyance, they were created at one time, such as conveyance divisions, such as public land survey systems, such as all of those, they would share lines on them. So inside the parcel fabric, there is this concept of two different ways in which lines are used. One is a shared line, one is an overlapping line. All right. We're done with all that. So again, this data set, this is a parcel fabric data set that's for all intents and purposes ready to use. You can see things like symbology is not set very well. Things like, if I go in here, things such as the point feature class is displaying so far out. There's a whole lot of things that you want to set inside of here to make it seem better. The question now is, okay, so let's go and look at, we've built out parcels. What about building other things in here? Because remember, with this data set, we have parcels, we have roads, we have subdivisions, we have municipalities. Which of these are we going to go and bring in to our parcel fabric? Let's bring in subdivisions on here. All right, let's go ahead and bring these in. I put them in here only because we want to go and just show where these things are. If I turn off my parcel fabric here, and I turn off my points, here's this small element in here that we've got. Again, this is the parcel fabric, and here's the subdivisions inside of here. So we go through this exact same process, but we want to go and put this next one in. We're going to start by creating inside the parcel fabric a new feature class, a new series of feature classes that are set up for the subdivisions. So we'll go in here and we'll go to manage and we'll add a new parcel type. And again, remember, we're going to call this new parcel type. We want to name it differently than this. We're going to call it subdivisions PF on here, and go ahead and tell it to create that. And once you've been through this a couple times, it's you sort of get used to it, but it's still things you have to think about. Oh, it's saying it's being edited. So I can't create this while I'm editing this over here. Common issue. So how do I handle this? Two things I could do. I could get out of my current project and do it that way, and do it through while I'm in a catalog version of this, or there's a trick here. If I go under projects options and I go to editing here, turns out there is in 2.6, I think it was, in 2.7 also, there's a thing called enable and disable editing, in which it goes and puts up over on the edit tab a little button here. This is start editing, stop editing. Right now, because it's depressed, I can see a dash here. I'm editing. Let's go ahead and save those. Save that edits. Now let's go ahead and run this again. And it will go and run without giving me the error. By the way, that little edit button, that start and stop editing, if you're someone who edits a lot, that's a real pain. You just, you know, the only reason I ever use this is in this instance where I've got to do something against the data set, and right now it's locked because it is editing. All right, so I've got that there. It didn't bring it in here. In order to bring this in, I have to reapply my parcel fabric. So let me go and take all of these and remove them. Now let's go here and say, add this again to my current map. All right. Going to turn that off, turn that off, turn this off also. Oh, interesting observation. ESRI has slightly changed the way they do this, but with 2.7, as you're building a parcel fabric, the first parcel type that you build will be on top. The next parcel type you build will be next one down. So the first one I built was the parcel fabric, and then it came to the subdivisions PF. With earlier versions, it was inverted. The first one you built appeared on the bottom, and then it built on top of them. And they've corrected that now with this latest version. So now you build from the top down instead of from the bottom up. Observations, that's all. All right. So I've got this now. Let's go ahead and open up the fields for my subdivision. Let's go ahead and open up the fields for my old data, put them next to one another, and take, here is the 3 attribute fields that I want. I can copy those, right click and paste them here. And then I can say, go ahead and add those attribute fields to my schema. It's faster after somebody doesn't have to talk about every single one of these attributes as you're going through, isn't it? So Carmen, can you verify for me, what time are we going until? We go until 1 o'clock?
This will run until noon Central Time, so that would be 1 your time.
Sorry.
Yes.
I keep referencing my time zone, sorry. Until
no
noon.
problem.
Okay. All right. So now I have these new attributes on here. All right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and do a load and append. Open up the geoprocessing, go to append on here. Go ahead and double click on there. I'm going to take the original subdivisions and I'm going to append them to subdivision PF. I'm going to make sure that I say use field mapping, and on the name field, I want that name field to be the Muni PAP, the MUN plat. Let's make that the plat name instead. All right, add that as selected and say, go ahead and run this and let it go and append the polygons from the subdivision, the old subdivision layer in, and move them in. To verify that this worked, let's open up that attribute table. There's the name that got populated correctly. Go in here and now go, here's the plat number, plat name, and document number on here. So that did get populated correctly. We're done with that guy out of here. So now we have the polygons in here. We're going to use the parcel fabric and the way it works to go and build the lines and the points or anything else it needs. In order to do that, we need to have records on here. So we're going to go in here and go, and we're going to create parcel records. I'm going to tell it this parcel fabric. Actually, what we're going to do is we're going to do the subdivision PFs. And we're going to do an expression. On here, we're going to say migrate it. And we're going to do sub and then a space, and then plus, and then we'll put the plat name in there. All right. Remember, the text is surrounded or delineated with double quotes, and then a plus sign, and then the actual value out of that individual feature. We can tell it to go ahead and create that. So it has gone and created the records for me. Just to verify that, let's go in here, go to records, open up that attribute table, and let's go down to the bottom. And in fact, there's a sub. Here's the subdivisions in here that I created. These are the other values that I used when I was building this stuff up. I created records and stuff like that. None of them are valid, but I've created them. All right, I've created records. I've appended those on here. So what do I have left? I go in here and I build parcel fabric. Go ahead and take this, and since I don't have an individual name I want to go and build, I can just tell it build everything on here and it will go through and rebuild it. But again, what this process does is it goes and looks at the record table. For every record in there, it sees whether or not there's polygons, whether or not there's lines, and whether or not there's corners. That's really all that the parcel fabric does, is it makes sure that it complies with the rules, make sure that it has the right structure. And eventually this afternoon, we'll talk about attribute rules and other things like that, and make sure that it's in compliance with all of those. So Carmen, you had a question earlier about multi-editor. Does Bayfield have portal in place?
Could you repeat the last part?
Does Bayfield have a portal in place?
We do. Yep. With Enterprise, we have some services published through that, but that's definitely not the design of our fabric right now. We do have it in SDE with one editor in the ArcMap type. Yeah.
Okay. So what release of software, what enterprise or ArcGIS server software are you using?
I think it's the latest. I apologize if I get the version wrong. Are we on 10.8.1 or 10.8.2?
Probably 10.8.1.
Okay. I think so. It's a little complex because I know we have updates on the DMZ external side versus the internal, and that gets a little confusing sometimes, but I think we're on one of those two, the latest version.
So let me go and just give you all warning. All right. In order to go and serve the parcel fabric out, the enterprise server software has to be in agreement with the desktop software, or put the other way, the desktop software has to be in agreement with the server software.
Okay.
As far as the release of the parcel fabric. Again, the parcel fabric right now that we have built here is in fact release number 4, version number 4. So if you use 2.7 to build it, it's version 4. If we use 2.6 to build it, it's version 3. Version 3 uses ArcGIS Enterprise 10.8.1. Version 4 uses ArcGIS Enterprise 10.9. So if you're migrating this and eventually plan on having it on enterprise, you just want to make sure you know that before you build the parcel fabric in the first place. All right, so if you don't have 10.9, you don't intend on going to 10.9, don't use 2.7 to build the parcel fabric. Use 2.6 to build the parcel fabric. ESRI is aware of this, but you want to be careful with that. Just know that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you. Okay, so we actually have this in here. If I go and turn off my parcels, here is my subdivision polygons in here. All right, and notice again, some of the things that you'll find with differences is that even though I've turned off my parcels, the points associated with those parcels are still displayed, still turned on, and they will get turned on no matter what. They'll always be on. If you see a point, it means there is something associated with that point, with that corner on there. That could be a current parcel, or it could be a historic parcel. As long as it's connected to something, it will display that in there. All right. So again, the subdivisions are now in here. They are built. The subdivision polygons are in here, or polylines are in here. It has lines for everything, and they all have their global IDs. They all have created by records in here. All right. No COGO values anywhere at all. So one of the questions often is, well, how do I get my COGO value in here on this? And there is, I've got my COGO lines here, or I've got my lines here for my subdivisions. I'm going to go and tell it select every single subdivision line. And I have on my modify pane on the very bottom, I have a tool called Update COGO. And my Update COGO tool is disabled or not enabled. Why is that? Because I enabled this stupid edit button here. I have to click that button before this is enabled. Now that it's enabled, I can tell it, go ahead and update all of the subdivision lines, and it will calculate the COGO values for every one of those subdivision lines. All right. Let's let that finish. By the way, we're looking at this while we're waiting for the values. The update COGOs now has the option to either tell it to update everything, just overwrite whatever's in there, or I can tell it to look at if there's an existing value stored in that field, to only update it if there's a difference between that value and what it's going to update by a certain amount. So I can tell it to only update the distance field if it's a foot or more different than what it was before. Or I can tell it to update the direction field only if there's a variance of either the direction itself, the bearing, or maybe a lateral offset, maybe a rotation or something that's gone on. So I can control whether or not it just overwrites everything, or whether it actually goes and just keeps the current values in there. All right, and you can see that it's now gone and calculated the directions and the distance. And if I have any curves in here, it actually calculates the radius in here and the arc length for me in here also. So there is, on every single line feature class, there is a domain, an attribute field called COGO type. That COGO type defines where the COGO values came from. And the values that you have, there's 3 different options in here. It can be that if I entered that COGO, all right, if I put it in here while I was building a traverse, it would then get coded that, in fact, I entered this value. This is not something that it got from anywhere else. So the values are entered, or if I calculated the value, if I used update COGO or I inversed the value, it would say from geometry. And then finally, if I took in my workflow and actually went and split that line, maybe by doing a clip or something else, it would tell me that the COGO value that remains there is no longer the original one, and it's no longer inversed. It's actually now been computed, that it calculated that. So you can keep track of where the COGO values that are stored in these line fields actually came from. You also have over here a field that says, is COGO the ground distance? Because inside of ArcGIS Pro, you have ground to grid, where you can actually tell it whether or not you're using ground distances or grid distances, or whether you have a bearing rotation. If you've got an assumed bearing base, you can use this tool to go and input what the difference is between that assumed bearing base and what the actual grid bearings are that you've got on here. Difference tolerance, yes, specifically it is. You can tell it what those are, and it will, you can either input them or you can calculate them as you go through here on here. All right, and then if you do have a rotation in here, you can tell it what the rotation is, and it will calculate the scale on there also. So they actually will go and add that in there. All right. So I've taken the subdivision fields and I've calculated those so that it now has the values on here. And when I go in, you can actually see that it's inputting labels for all of these values for the subdivision lines on here. It will probably help if I turn off this so you can see these lines in here. Again, these labels have scale dependency on them, so that as I go in here. So let's look at this. How does it handle the labels? Because these are labels, these are not annotation. These are labels. So if I go to my table of contents, all the way over on the right-hand side is the list by labeling. And it turns out that I can either tell it to label the direction and distance, which is what it's doing now, or I could tell it to turn off and only do the distance for me. All right. So if I go in here, let's look at the labeling properties. Come on, here we go. So I'm looking at the direction and distance field right now, and this is the arcade label expression for this. All right. All right, and this is a fairly intense label expression. It's got a lot of variables that are set up front, whether or not it uses quadrant bearings, whether or not you want to show the distance, direction, the radius, what curve parameters to go and show what you put in there. So they've got that written all into it. In addition, they've also gone and put in here whether you got full COGO in here, partial COGO in here, whether it's valid or invalid COGO, the font size. So this is, again, a very, very intense label expression that's in here. But if you want to go and learn about Arcade and using it for label expression, this is actually a pretty good one. Interestingly, in here, they also go and calculate the quadrant bearing, including degrees, minutes, and seconds for the individual angle, because it turns out that inside of here, the line field the direction field is actually a number. So it's being stored as a number. So in order to go and label this, they have to calculate what that number is in here, what that actual number is that's being shown back to you. And that's what that portion of that expression did. And then it goes through and figures out whether or not you've got true values in here for your COGO, whether it's valid or not valid, and it puts different colors on here, shows you how to go and display the directions and the distance and any curve parameters in here that it's going to show. Then it goes and assembles the string on here. All right. So interestingly, there's a problem with this in here, and that basically ESRI went and copied this same attribute, copied the same label expression, whether or not you have bearings shown or not. Well, if I go in here and I have bearings shown, you can see that it has an extra line here that it uses for the bearing. But if I switch that over and just put distance field in it, it actually spaces that off an extra space on here. So if it's above it, it works fine. But if it's below it, it actually puts an extra space and puts sort of some obscure spacing in here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into the just distance one. And it turns out that right here is that if it's not a curve, I'm going to take the string and the command to go and tell it, put it on the next line. I'm going to take that out and tell it to go and apply that. And then suddenly my labels are going to show up correctly on here. So this is one of those little things that we found in when ESRI put this together. They didn't quite set it up so it works for both distance and direction and just distance. Again, here it works fine. Here, now that it's been corrected, it works well. So you just want to be careful about that. As it comes out of the box, there's all sorts of tweaks that you should be doing on this. All right. So let's look at a couple things in here. Let's go back here to table of contents. And let's look at here, densified curves. Let's figure out if I have a parcel fabric and I go in here and I go and import this in, and my original feature classes have densified curves on them, I wind up with this. And if I zoom in here, I can see that this is actually nothing more than a series of straight lines between here. Straight lines between here. They don't have COGO on them. If I wanted to put COGO on here, I could go in here and select these lines. And these are just the parcel lines in here. And I can tell it to go and, history here. Go here and say, just go ahead and update these. I just want to know what the COGO values are in here. And you can see these are tiny, tiny 2.5 foot lines in here, 3 foot lines, completely inconsistent with what is in here. So how do you fix that? Because if you want to use this for labeling, how do you go in here and fix something like this on here? There's actually a workflow for doing this on here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here and I'm going to go and work through this process to go and clean up densified curves inside of the parcel fabric. So much easier than it used to be in ArcMap, but in many ways it follows that same process. What we're going to do is we're going to click on the parcels quality-driven workflows. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to turn off the topology. Why would we turn off the topology? We're going to use a tool that's going to go and rebuild the parcel polygons for this. And if we had topology on here, when it went to rebuild it, it would attempt to go and delete all of those individual lines, those small little 2 and 3 foot lines. It would delete them. And the topology would give me an error saying you can't delete this if topology is turned on. So I'm going to turn off topology here. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here and I'm going to use a tool called Align Features. This Align Features tool, I'm going to go and draw a path. I'm going to draw a line. And it's going to go and evaluate all vertices within a tolerance of that line. And it's going to correct everything that is turned on. So I'm going to go and tell it I want to draw an endpoint curve. And I want it to go from here to here. Now I have to tell what the tolerance is. Now let's just use a 5-foot tolerance on here. So it's going to look at every single vertex inside that 5-foot tolerance and try to correct it so they all fit against this true curve that's going on. So I can tell it to go and align it. It went and aligned it all. It didn't get rid of that old stuff yet, but it realigned the polygons, realigned anything that's within that tolerance. And as I did that, I have this allow aligning parcels without a selection. So I did not have to select what I was going to do this with. By the way, if you've got a parcel fabric that you've been using for a while, you want to make sure that every layer is turned on that could contain something. So if I had historic parcels here, I would want to make sure those are turned on. You have to correct everything at the same time. I'm now going to go in here and I'm going to go and select. I'm going to hold down my shift key and make sure I select all of those points in here. Then I'm going to go and hold down my control key and unselect the polygon, unselect this line here. That line's good. And that line there, that's good. I'm going to verify it by going over to my attributes and saying, what have I got selected? I've got points. Good. I want to delete those. I'll let the parcel fabric rebuild them. And then I've got all these little lines in here. That's good. Now I'm going to right click here and I'm going to say delete every one of those things. This is the old stuff I don't want anymore. Now that I've got that deleted, I can see I've got no lines in here, so I shouldn't have any issues with that. Now I'm going to tell it, again, topology is still off. I'm going to tell it to go ahead and build my extent. Up until this point, we've been using build active, meaning if I have an active record here. By the way, that should be inactive. But now I'm going to say it just build any record that is inside my current drawing extent. So again, the build process, it goes to the records, looks at the records and says, do you have polygons? Yes. Do you have lines? No. Let me build the lines for that polygon on here. So I can say, go ahead and build my extent. It will look at every record inside of here and create the lines that are missing from those polygons. So what I've done is I've gotten rid of densified curves inside the polygons that are represented here. So let me go and do that one more time. Turn off topology. go to my align features, tell it I want to create a curve, an endpoint arc curve or an endpoint curve. Go to the endpoints. I'll do that. Tell it to go ahead and align to here. It will go and align them all. I can then go and select and then unselect everything I want to keep. Those are all, I'm holding down the control key to unselect things. I can verify and say, what have I got selected? I've got points, I've got these lines, those are good. Right click, delete that. Now go ahead and have the parcel fabric validate the rules and check and make sure that the structure's in here for all of these so that every polygon has lines on it. So build inside my current extent. And it's gone and it's built every one of them. Each of these have its own separate line in here. And they have gotten rid of that densified curve. Now, just to verify it, let me go and select these lines and go back to my update COGO. Say, go ahead and update the COGO on this. Now I can see here is my COGO values. These again are inverse COGO values. If I wanted to correct them, I could go and actually input those values in there. But there's my COGO values for those curves in here. And let's clear this out. So that densified curve in here has now been replaced by true geometry. And I can verify whether or not this reflects what's actually on the plat or CSM or survey. And if it does not, I can go in there and correct it. So let's say this is supposed to be, let's take these curves here. These curves here, let's uncheck and get rid of those here. Go to my attributes. And I don't want my parcels. I have all of these. Maybe this is supposed to be 183 even. Maybe it's supposed to be 180. So I can go in here and I can say my radius is actually 180. Let's call it 185.00 feet. All right. And you'll note that it's already now modified. So I can make sure that it reflects what's on that subdivision plat or that deed or that survey. Any questions on this? Any questions on that? I went through what used to be a very complex workflow and procedure inside of ArcMap Parcel Fabric. And I did it fairly quickly. Granted, if you've got thousands of these around here, you know, might take you a while, but you can fix them. They're fairly easy to fix. No topology. Go here, go to my align not align parcels, sorry. Align features in here, 5 foot. Go and say start here. Go to here. This is my curve. Fix that up. Oh, what happened? As you go in here and reenact align features, be aware that internally, every single time you turn on align features, it sets that topology. All right, so I can go in here and align features here to here. Go ahead. Do the same thing here to here. Go and select these old lines that I want to get rid of. Unselect the things I don't want to delete. Right click, delete them. Tell it to rebuild my extent. If I wish to, I could tell it to go in here and re-inverse and update my Kogo on here. There we go. All right, any questions on that? By the way, that's something that you give to an intern. You don't want your main mapper doing all that. All right. We are now about quarter to noon on your time. Is there anything else specifically you want to go and find out about in here? This afternoon, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about, now that you got a parcel fabric, all right, how do you make it easier for you to work in? For example, right now, both of these lines, both the parcel lines and the subdivision lines all say Kogo. The subdivision polygons say parcel. How do you fix that? How do you change that? How do you go and make sure, for example, that when you calculate a parcel, it automatically calculates all those other fields that you want it to automatically calculate? How do you put in place rules that say that when I put something in here, calculate that also? These are attribute rules. How do you put those in place? We're going to go over that this afternoon. Is there anything else specifically? If we have time, or if you want to, we can go through the slides on deploying this inside of Enterprise. I kind of would prefer not to, only because it's just slide. There's no real demo on it. And it really comes down to individually how you've got it, your portal set up. There's a whole lot of things in there that can, it's just following a series of tasks. 15 minutes. Let's look at this. There's one more thing I can demo in 15 minutes. One of the things that comes with the parcel fabric is a set of tasks with predefined procedures for you. Now, these predefined procedures, they're a good way to start in the parcel fabric, a good way to figure out how to get working with it, but you'll quickly outgrow them. But I at least want to go and show you how to go and at least initially go and start them. So in order to go and turn on the task, what I'll do is I'll go to my insert tab, and I'll go down and pull down task, and I'll say import and open tasks. And by default, there's two sets of, depending upon what extensions you have. There's either the parcel fabric tasks or the network analyst. Let me go and pull up the parcel fabric one. So by the way, this first set of tasks, that's for publishing. And it works you through how to go and publish. The second set of tasks is for record-driven workflows, sort of the everyday thing that you might do. I'm going to go and load those tasks on here. And when I load them over here, it will show me here they are. I can merge parcels. I can split a single parcel. I can do meets and bounds. I can do area descriptions, and I can do from CAD. Careful. This is one of the things that people often stumble with. These are set up for ESRI's naming conventions. And if you brought your names in, or if you added them different, these things won't work. So the first thing you have to do is you have to go and test to see, is this thing set up from my type of naming convention? And you do that under messages. And when I click on messages, it says, oh, you got problems here. These things doesn't find them. So if I double click on one of these, it will bring up the designer. And when I click on this, it will tell me what it's looking for is the map that contains my parcel fabric. And it used to be called parcel editing map. What is it called now? In this case, it's just called map. I just went and cleared out that problem. Now there's also one here. Let me click on this. It says it's looking for, under the parcel editing map, it's looking for a layer called parcels. That's the parcel polygon. So I could pull that down and say, well, that's actually called parcels_PF. Cleared that error out. Now I have, what about parcel lines? If I click on that, it says it's actually looking under that map for parcels lines. Well, what is that called in mine? That's just called parcels_PF_lines. When I do that, it's cleared out all of the messages about the resources, and now the tasks are ready for me to use with my data set, with my naming convention. So here's with everything, you want to not just look, oh, this is a great thing, because here's the things you cannot do with this. This is set up for the parcel layer. This is not set up for subdivision layers. This is not set up for CSM layers. This is not set up for conveyance division layers. This is not set up for any other layer. This is set up for one layer at a time. So it's all set up. It will work against parcels. It will also only work against one parcel at a time. So if I have a CSM that contains multiple parcels, I can't use my task to do that. So these are really good starting points, but don't rely upon them. Just, okay, this is a good place to start. So let's work through one. So what does it do? It steps you through the individual things that you're going to be looking for. So let's do a merge parcel. So I'll double click on merge parcel. The first thing it says is create a record. So I can go and create a record. It will go and create the record for me. Now it says locate the parcels, and it brings up the locators. Well, locator, actually, I don't care about that because I'm actually right here. I don't need to do anything with it. So I can tell it to skip this one. Now it says select my parcels. I'm going to take and merge these two parcels together. I'm going to say next parcel, next step. Okay, you're now on merge. What do you want to do? Merge has a lot of options in here. I can merge it to an existing layer, sort of to clean things up. I can merge it to a new parcel or a new feature. I can merge it using a template, a different template, or if I turn this off, I can tell it merge everything into this big parcel. So merge, while it seems simple, can be very complex. In this case, I'm going to take these two parcels and going to merge this one into here. I'm going to combine it, or consolidation, or whatever you call it. And I'm going to tell it to keep my original features, mark them historic. So as I do that now, I can say, go ahead and finish. It went and took my two parcels, merged them together, got rid of the line between them. And if I turn on my historic, I can now see here's my historic parcel. If I do this here, my attributes, I have my current parcel is the combined one. My historic parcel is this one. I can also do that. If I look at the historic parcel, the created by record, because of the way it was created in there, and the retired by record is now marked on here, marking what that is. And it's gone and calculated some of the attributes. It has not calculated stated area unit, calculated areas. None of this is calculated on here. None of this. This is this was brought over, but it did not take any of these other attributes over. Merge. Let's go do a split. Let's go to tasks. And I want to do a split. Double click it. Say, okay, here's my record. Create a record. It says, okay, go ahead and locate it. No, I know where I'm at on here. Now I select the parcel I want to split. And what this is going to do is it's going to provide a function for me. It's going to basically do what's called a copy lines to. If you're an ArcMap parcel fabric user, a copy lines to is construct from parent. All right. It's going to take these lines. It's going to take the lines associated with this parcel and copy them into this. It's only going to show me my current. It's only going to show me the features that are part of this record. And I can say, go ahead and copy lines over there. Again, construct from parent is what this is doing. So now I've got construct from parent on here. If I tell it, just go ahead and show me, select for this record. Yeah, there they are. That's fine. Now what's left for me to do is to actually draw the line on here. And this could be as simple as, hey, it's got to go from here to here. That's it. That's where the split is. So I put the lines in here that I want. Maybe it's two of these. Maybe there's like that. Next step, we'll actually go through and create the seeds and then build them on here. Created the seeds. It's now building the parcels. It's marking the old ones historic. It's having selected, there's the 3 new parcels for me. That's the power of the parcel fabric. It runs through, make sure that structurally it contains everything it needs. There is a set of tasks, but more importantly, those tasks are just taking the normal process and initially modifying them for you or putting them in place so you understand what they're doing. All right. That's merge parcels, split a parcel, you just drawing lines in, putting that in there. There's also a task for, let's finish this task. There's also splitting a parcel by building a meets and bounds parcel on here. Again, this is only one parcel. You can't build multiple meets and bounds on here. You could also do an area division. So if it said, the east half of this parcel in here, you could do that. Let's go ahead and do an area division here. Create a record. Always create a record. Skip this. Select this parcel. There's the parcel. How are we going to split it? We're going to split it into equal areas. All right. Let's put it into proportional. This is easier to go and understand. Let's do it in 2 different parcels. All right. The original one is 391,000 square feet. We're going to go down to 195. I'm going to tell it to split it parallel with that line. And it will go and split it parallel to that line. Say and finish. Here's one of the deficiencies with this. This does not do curves. This does not do a series of lines. So we can't say, if there's a break in the line, we can't tell it to go and split it off of that line. It's one straight line right now, but it kind of works. There it is. And then go ahead and assign the names on them. The tasks. The simple parcel fabric that were built, completely non-configured. Nothing's getting calculated. Nothing's working through there. All right. Any questions on this so far? I am really shocked that nobody had a question about the tasks. Nothing. You must all be really hungry or something.
Frank, a general question is, what's your favorite thing about the Parcel Fabric and ArcGIS Pro? What's your favorite?
Actually, the favorite part to me, I can tell you what my favorite part is, and then I can tell you what my favorite tool is. All right. The favorite part is this whole concept of the fact that the Parcel Fabric, if I forget to do something, all I have to do is say, build it, and it automatically goes and builds it for me. It does it for me. It serves as a second check for me to go and do this. If I'm going and for example, if I'm building lines in here, all right, so I have a series of lines in here, and I create lines, and I think that they close. When I do, it creates seeds. It tells me, you're not doing this because that thing doesn't close yet. It automatically goes and serves as somebody sitting behind me, always checking to make sure it's in full compliance, that it's built correctly. All right, that's the favorite thing. My favorite tool was that one I just showed you earlier, that line features tool. Oh my God, I'm in love with that. That's the reason why Panda went and started using the Parcel Fabric. You see this right here? Turns out there's an overlap. All right. Somebody forgot to go and make sure that those lines are coincident. Well, I can go into here and go to the Align Features tool. Here we are right here. Align Features tool. And I can draw, what is that line supposed to be? And again, maybe it's supposed to be there. Maybe it's not supposed to be there. And I can tell it, go in. I can tell you, this is where the line is supposed to be. Go ahead and align my parcels up, and it goes and zips them up. Make sure there's no gaps. Make sure there's no overlaps on here. That tool, if nothing else, caused us to move into the Parcel Fabric. And not just the Parcel Fabric, but into ArcGIS Pro. That one tool allows us to go and do all of this cleanup, allows us to go and make sure that these are coincident. That tool. So those are my two favorite things about it. Parcel Fabric, the fact that it checks and makes sure that everything is structurally and it follows the rules. And then two, the Align Features tool allows me to do cleanup of past things that aren't in there correctly. And it just allows me to go and verify everything is in there right. Allows me to go and do realignments. When I have a remonumentation project and I want to go and make sure things match up to where they're supposed to be, Align Features tool. All right, we're past noon. I'm sorry about that. I'm going to be quiet.
Yep, we've timed it really well. Great job. That was a great first part of really your workshop, because you're speaking all day, and thank you. So we will take now an hour break. You can eat lunch, take a break, but if you also wanted to stay tuned in, we have map contest highlights that'll be taking place on this Zoom meeting link, this same channel. And then we will resume at 1 p.m. Central Time with part 2 of Frank's Parcel Fabric workshop.
With one request.
Yes.
Please have some questions this afternoon. Please.
Yes, I think we'll be warmed up. I'll bring some more questions. I think part of the thing with me is I guess they feel like silly questions perhaps, but there are so many questions, and then one thing leads to another question. So
that's exactly. Well, that's one reason why we unstructured this as much as possible, so that we could go down those rabbit holes to give as much clarity and as much understanding as possible. That's the reason why we did that. So please think about questions and come back after lunch, and otherwise go to the map gallery and look at some of the maps and such. Thank you.
Okay.
All right.